Hi everybody, welcome to Back Talk with Todd Herman. In what has become a yearly ritual, the old media's cameragenic prompter readers are once again reciting breathless phrases about our laughably named debt ceiling. But while the legacy media runs pro-Obama info advocacy pieces about how the government must, for about the 100th time, change the so-called legal limit on our debt, the fact is this: the $17 trillion ceiling is a blatant lie, and not because we continually vote to spend past it. No, the fraud is much larger than that. The fiction that we are only hitting our debt limit now, October 1, 2013, is because of the greatest act of fiscal bamboozlement and most public, least hidden, atrocious act of financial fraud you've witnessed in your lifetime. Well, would have witnessed if we had a news media. For over 100 days, your government has been lying about the state of our monthly deficit and resulting debt, and no one in the mainstream media, CBS, NBC, ABC, NPR, CNN, has found time to say a word about it. Not one. The Beltway banned media cannot claim this is a programming decision and not a political one, because this story of this scam on this unprecedented level would be the media's equivalent of a coffee fiend's first cup of early morning roast, except for one problem: it has the wrong bad guy. This is a clear sign that journalism in this country is as dead as the looks of hope for fatherly guidance and tough love are in the eyes of Miley Cyrus. The media may ignore it, but as people who care about the future of your children, you cannot afford to let it pass. The legacy media usually loves financial scandals. You'll recall Kenneth Lay and Bernie Madoff. Those names are familiar because the mainstream media wanted you to know about these bad guys. Let's compare these criminals to the fraudsters the media won't talk about. Kenneth Lay was the CEO of Enron. The media made such a star out of Lay and Enron that PBS aired a movie about him and them, and the actors who play congressional representatives in D.C. got to perform their favorite scene: righteous, all-American outrage that the little people the congressmen protect from themselves had been abused by a wolf in wolf's clothing. Ken Lay and his team of money people at Enron hid the bad financial performance of the company from investors and regulators until it was too late for the people who chose to invest in Enron to get out. His scheme cost people, pensioners, investors, customers, speculators, at least $1 billion. Lay had a heart attack and died before he was sentenced, so his judgment has been meted out by the highest authority, but people still remember his name because the mainstream media erected his image as a benchmark of corporate greed. Bernie Madoff's made from mainstream media crime is the lifestyles of the rich and private bilked by the rich and devious. Bernie wasn't a genius. His was simply a classic Ponzi scheme. When people chose to invest money with Madoff, he paid them, not with the funds he had gained investing their money, but with the money he got from other people by convincing them to invest with him. And the ripoff worked as long as Madoff was able to fool new people into giving him their money so he could hand it to new investors while keeping the largest portion for himself. Bernie's scam cost $65 billion. When Madoff was caught, he went swiftly to prison and was ordered to pay restitution. The media besoaked themselves in images of Madoff's ill-gotten bling being rolled away, and his is a household name to this day. $65 billion. Amazing, right? Sickening greed, isn't it? But in financial terms, Madoff fraud is, well, it's literally like a rounding error, a very small rounding error, in comparison to the one by which you are being ripped off right this minute. And yet, the biggest fraudsters in history of all financial fraud, they won't go to jail. They won't even be worried about a harshly worded letter from the authorities. But these fraudsters aren't defrauding people of money given them by free choice, as was the case with Madoff and Lay. They are simply walking into your home, bank, credit union, business, 401k, 403b, IRA, money market fund, or pension and taking what they want without telling you. The mainstream media won't even mention this fraud, though it is demonstrably worse than any committed by Lay or Madoff or any other financial fraud in the history of Western civilization. The crime I'm talking about has happened in the open. For over 100 days, a fraudulent suit, a wolf in politicians' clothing and hipster glasses, has been openly, clearly, inarguably, unambiguously lying about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of money that not one private citizen, not a single one, chose to give him the right to manipulate in this way. The crime is so obvious that anyone who can understand Sesame Street can understand this. Can you tell the difference between these two numbers? Well, then you must recognize that this is fraud on a massive scale, and the media cannot claim the matter's too complicated for Ma and Pa America to understand. And so who is this criminal, and why is the media not covering this? The answers are one and the same. Jack Lew, Barack Obama's Secretary of the Treasury, is the man doing the lying, and that is why the media is not doing the reporting. To the old media, prolific government is good, and access to American idols like Barack Obama and Jack Lew mean power for the media hustlers, unless they seriously report on topics like this. Then they won't get called to dinner hour yuck fests with their heroes in cush government jobs. And the facts are simple. In July and August of this year, the United States government spent $244 billion more than it received through income. Again, said another way so there are no misunderstandings. Your government spent $244 billion more than it took in revenue, and in that same period of time, Jack Lew has claimed in official government documents that our debt has not gone up a single dime. In August, the government spent $146 billion more than it took in. For July, the number was $98 billion, and neither of those numbers are zero, and added together, they're even much less like zero. In fact, they equal $244 billion. And here's the catch. That $244 billion it came from somewhere. And if we didn't borrow the money, from where did it come? If you believe Jack Lew, $244 billion was born from extraordinary measures. That is exactly what he told John Boehner he would use. Extraordinary accounting measures. In the real world, that can also be looked upon as cooking the books. The folks at townhall.com had a fun way of explaining this. Let's say that at the beginning of August, your bank balance was $3,000. And let's say you went to fancy dinners, took a stay in a great hotel, and paid your mortgage, all of which totaled $3,000. But when you looked at your bank account, lucky you, that same $3,000 was still there. Well, you clearly used a credit card or borrowed the money you spent from someone and will have to pay it back, right? Nope, not according to Jack Lew. You simply used extraordinary measures. Accounting gimmicks and baking the books aside, in my opinion and that of other smarter people, there are only two likely choices for what really happened. The government sent checks to people behind which there was no money to pay them, which in the real world is passing a fraudulent check, and at this amount of money, that would land you in a barred cell. Of course, in this case, the Federal Reserve could just tell the banks to place the so-called money in digital form in people's digital accounts, or the Treasury invented the money out of thin air. But that is not what Jack Lew said. He said he moved money around using extraordinary measures. What appears absolutely certain is that Jack Lew simply stopped counting our debt, which remained frozen at the magic number of $16,699,396,000,000, just below the laughable debt ceiling, and it remained there for about 100 days, during which time Jack Lew admits in writing in official government documents that we spent $244 billion more than we took in. An astounding and a shameful fraud made worse by a purely political motive. And now, let's get to the biggest financial fraud in your lifetime. What's that? Oh, did you think I'd told you about the big fraud? Oh, you good, honest, trusting people. Ken Lay's fraud was about $1 billion. Madoff's $65 billion. Jack Lew's most recent lie is about $244 billion. But these are all lice on the back of a huge, hairy monster that is not fictional and is not friendly and is headed straight towards you. The big lie is about the number you will hear a lot this week, $17 trillion. The legacy media says we have a $17 trillion debt, and that is an enormous number. But $17 trillion is merely the monster roaring its arrival. It is the sound of the beast, but not the fury of its claws and teeth. As this Wall Street Journal article explains, our debt is not 17 or 25 or 40 or $60 trillion. Our actual debt, good people, is $86 trillion. Jack Lew has frozen our debt level for over 100 days to make it appear that we avoided hitting a ceiling of 17 trillion, which is ridiculous because our real-world debt, when you include everything we owe, will never in your lifetime, the lifetimes of your children or grandchildren, ever, not ever, be below $17 trillion. It won't be below 25, 35, 45, 65, or 70 trillion. Our actual debt is 5 times larger than what Washington, D.C. will tell you. Said another way, you have 5 times less money than you think you do. How can that be? Because unlike most any honest company in America, the sheltered elite in Washington, D.C. use a unique, some might say creative, accounting method. In the real world, businesses apply what are called generally accepted accounting principles because they are just that, generally accepted. In the bubble of D.C., there are 2 types of debt and 2 sets of books, it would appear. D.C. types privately refer to on-the-books debt and off-the-books debt. The U.S. debt that is off the books, meaning not reported to you, unless by a remnant act of journalism in an era of Matt Lauers and Candy Crowleys, is so large, 86 trillion, that it literally dwarfs the entire gross domestic product of the United States. Our GDP was worth about 15 trillion US dollars in 2012. By the way, that represents about 25.30% of the entire world economy. Our on-the-books debt at 17 trillion is approximately 1,084 times larger than what our entire country produces economically in 1 year. But our off-the-books debt, 86 trillion, is 5,483 times as big as what our entire country produced economically in 1 year. And you were worried about Jack Lew's little $244 billion lie. And so where does this leave us? If we assume that only people who pay income tax owe this money, a reasonable assumption in the era of Obama phones, Obamacare, cash for clunkers, Solyndra, bailouts for Goldman Sachs and the UAW, you owe roughly $573,000, without counting the interest that will accrue over time. What will your family do when you get a bill for $573,000? We have treated our responsibilities of stewards of America with all the rigor, wisdom, and self-control that Billy Ray Cyrus applied to fathering teddy bear humping Miley. One day, in some way, either with $200 loaves of bread, the government erasing the digital money in your 401k, an absolute societal collapse, a massive war, or in some other remarkably unpleasant manner, you will be forced to pay. We all stand here as witnesses to something that one day our children and grandchildren will have every right to present to us as our complete betrayal of their financial futures, and we will have nothing, literally nothing, to justify our refusal to do anything less than what we absolutely must do. And no one, not a soul, is coming to rescue you from this hole we have dug. Not Obama, not Hillary, not Rand Paul or Ted Cruz. We will have to rescue ourselves, and this is what we must do. Fire any politician of any party who does not, with immediate haste, call for a full-scale, top-to-bottom, independent investigation of what I think of as the palace of digital laundering called the U.S. Treasury, along with the immediate public firing of Jack Lew and everyone who ever agreed to use extraordinary measures to make anti-constitutional financial decisions to spend money only Congress can spend in order to give the illegitimate media room to hide what only can be called the biggest financial scam in our history. America must have one set of books where debt is debt and truth is hard, but completely true. We must replace the people willing to hide the true state of our finances on such an epic scale with people who will tell the hard truth and make adult decisions. If we cannot make this happen, you will have to take a serious look at your financial planning and decide whether it is a digital representation of a possibly fraudulent currency you should be saving, or if maybe, just maybe, that instinct you feel in your gut to prepare for a full-scale economic crash by owning actual assets and usable wares is the melodic whisper of a guardian angel telling you to remember that God helps those who help themselves.